Oh, yo, chapter 70. Tutored by Bakanan. You, I take it, I said to the mosaicist. Mosaicist is just a muralist. Right here, just to start you off, the narrator has ran into a guy doing a mural, and so he's talking to him. 70. Tutored by Bakanan. You, I take it, I said to the mosaicist, are Philip Castle, son of Julian Castle. That happiness is mine. I'm here to see your father. Are you an aspirin salesman? No. Too bad. Father's low on aspirin. How about miracle drugs? Father enjoys pulling off a miracle now and then. I'm not a drug salesman. I'm a writer. What makes you think a writer isn't a drug salesman? I'll accept that. Guilty as charged. Father needs some kind of book to read to people who are dying or in terrible pain. I don't suppose you've written anything like that. Not yet. I think there'd be money in it. There's another valuable tip for you. I suppose I could overhaul the 23rd Psalm, switch it around a little so nobody would realize it wasn't original with me. What? I'll accept it. I'm not a drug salesman, I'm a writer. What makes you think a writer isn't a drug salesman? I'll accept that. Guilty as charged. Father needs some kind of book to read to people who are dying or in terrible pain. I don't suppose you've written anything like that. Not yet. I think there'd be money in it. There's another valuable tip for you. I suppose I could overhaul the 23rd Psalm, switch it around a little so nobody would realize it wasn't original with me. Balkanen tried to overhaul it, he told me. Balkanen found out he couldn't change a word. You know him too? The happiness is mine. He was my tutor when I was a little boy. He gestured sentimentally at the mosaic. He was Mona's tutor too. Was he a good teacher? Mona and I can both read and write and do simple sums, said Castle, if that's what you mean. 71. The happiness of being an American. H. Lowe Crosby came over to have another go at Castle, the passant. What do you call yourself? Sneered Crosby. A beatnik or what? I call myself a botanist. That's against the law in this country, isn't it? I happen to have the happiness of being an American. I've been able to say I'm a botanist anytime I damn please, and so far, nobody's bothered me at all. I believe in obeying the laws of whatever country I happen to be in. You're not telling me the news. Crosby was livid. Screw you, Jack. Screw you, Jasper, said Castle mildly. And screw Mother's Day and Christmas, too. Crosby marched across the lobby to the desk clerk and he said, I want to report that man over there, that passant, the so-called artist. You got a nice little country here that's trying to attract the tourist trade and new investment and industry. The way that man talked to me, I don't ever want to see San Lorenzo again. And any friend who asks me about San Lorenzo, I'll tell them to keep the hell away. You may be getting a nice picture on the wall over there, but by God, the passant who's making it is the most insulting, discouraging son of a bitch I ever met in my life. The clerk looked sick. Sir, I'm listening, said Crosby, full of fire. Sir, he owns the hotel. 72. The Passant Hilton. H. Lowe Crosby and his wife checked out of Casamona. Crosby called it the Passant Hilton, and he demanded quarters at the American Embassy. So I was the only guest in a 100-room hotel. My room was a pleasant one. It faced, as did all the rooms, the boulevard of the 100 Martyrs to Democracy, Manzano Airport, and the boulevard harbor beyond. The Casamona was built like a bookcase with solid sides and back and with the front of blue-green glass, the squalor and misery of the city being to the sides. And back of the Casamona were impossible to see. My room was air-conditioned. It was almost chilly, and coming from the blaming heat into the chilliness, I sneezed. There were fresh flowers on my bedside table, but my bed had not yet been made. There wasn't even a pillow on the bed. There was simply a bare, brand-new Beauty Rest mattress, and there weren't any coat hangers in the closet. There wasn't any toilet paper in the bathroom. So I went out into the corridor to see if there was a chambermaid who would equip me a little more completely. There wasn't anybody out there, but there was a door open at the far end and very faint sounds of life. I went to the door and found a large suite paved with drop cloths. It was being painted, but the two painters weren't painting when I appeared. They were sitting on a shelf that ran the width of the window wall. They had their shoes off, they had their eyes closed, they were facing each other. They were pressing the soles of their bare feet together. Each grasped his own ankles, giving himself the rigidity of a triangle. I cleared my throat. The two rolled off the shelf and fell to the spattered drop cloth. They landed on their hands and knees and stayed in that position, their behinds in the air, their noses close to the ground. They were expecting to be killed. Excuse me, I said, amazed. Don't tell, begged one querulously. Please don't tell. Tell what? What you saw? I didn't see anything. If you tell, he said, and he put his cheek to the floor and looked up at me beseechingly. If you tell, we'll die on the hayuka. Oh, so they must have been having sex, huh? Yeah, homosexuals. They're just gay men having sex, I guess, through the subliminalness of the author's writing. Look, friends, I said, either I came in too early or too late, but I tell you again, I didn't see anything worth mentioning to anybody. Please, get up. They got up, their eyes still on me. They trembled and cowered. I convinced them at last that I would never tell what I had seen. What I had seen, of course, was a Bacchanist ritual of Baccomaro, or the mingling of awareness. We Bacchanist believe that it is impossible to be soul to soul with another person without loving the person, providing the feet of both persons are clean and nicely tended. The basis for the foot ceremony is this calypso. We will touch our feet, yes, yes, for all we're worth, and we will love each other, yes, yes, like we love our Mother Earth. Oh, I thought he was trying to be subliminal, like they were having sex, because some authors are very good at, like, writing. But I guess they literally just were, like, touching feet. It's like a kind of a sexual act, but it's not real sex, you know. I guess that's what they're trying to say, like, we could be affectionate without loving each other. 73, Black Death. So they were following a Bacchanist, you know, thing, ritual, so it's against that city. It's against the laws of that town, so they were just like, oh shit. 73, Black Death. When I got back to my room, I found that Philip Castle, the mosaicist, historian, self-indexer, passant, and hotel keeper, was installing a roll of toilet paper in my room. Thank you very much, I said. You're entirely welcome. This is what I call a hotel with a real heart. How many hotel owners would take such a direct interest in the comfort of a guest? How many hotel owners have just one guest? You used to have 3. Those were the days. You know, I may be speaking out of turn, but I find it hard to understand how a person of your interests and talents will be attracted to the hotel business. He frowned perplexedly. He frowned perplexedly. You know the word perplex. I don't seem to be as good with guests as I might. Do I? I knew some people in the hotel school at Cornell, and I can't help feeling they would have treated the Crosbys somewhat differently. He nodded uncomfortably. I know. He flapped his arms. Damn if I know why I built this hotel. Something to do with my life, I guess. A way to be busy. It went out to be lonesome. He shook his head. It was be a hermit or open a motel, with nothing in between. Weren't you raised at your father's hospital? That's right. Mona and I both grew up there. Well, aren't you at all tempted to do with your life what your father's done with his? Young Castle smiled wanly, avoiding a direct answer. He's a funny person, Father is, he said. I think you'll like him. I expect to. There aren't many people who've been as unselfish as he has. One time, said Castle, when I was about 15, there was a mutiny near here on a Greek ship bound from Hong Kong to Havana with a load of wicker furniture. The mutineers got control of the ship, didn't know how to run her, and smashed her up on the rocks near Papa Manzano's castle. Everybody drowned but the rats. The rats and the wicker furniture came ashore. That seemed to be the end of the story, but I couldn't be sure. So some people got free furniture and some people got bubonic plague. At Father's hospital, we have 1,400 deaths inside of 10 days. Have you ever seen anyone die of the bubonic plague? That unhappiness has not been mine. The lymph glands in the groin and the armpits swell to the size of grapefruit. I can't well believe it. After death, the body turns black. Coals to Newcastle in the case of San Lorenzo. When the plague was having everything its own way, the House of Hope and Mercy in the jungle looked like Auschwitz or Buchenwald. We had stacks of dead so deep and wide that a bulldozer actually stalled trying to shove them toward a common grave. Father worked without sleep for days. Worked not only without sleep, but without saving many lives either. Castle's grisly tale was interrupted by the ringing of my telephone. My God, said Castle, I didn't even know the telephones were connected yet. I picked up the phone. Hello? It was Major General Franklin Honecker who had called me up. He sounded out of breath and scared stiff. Listen, you got to come out to my house right away. We've got to have a talk. It could be a very important thing in your life. Could you give me some idea? Not on the phone, not on the phone. You come to my house. You come right away, please. All right. I'm not kidding you. This is a really important thing in your life. This is the most important thing ever. He hung up. What was that all about? Asked Castle. I haven't got the slightest idea if Frank Honecker wants to see me right away. Take your time, relax. He's a moron. He said it was important. How does he know what's important? I could carve a better man out of a banana. Well, finish your story anyway. Where was I? The bubonic plague. The bulldozer was stalled by corpses. Oh yes, anyway. One sleepless night I stayed up with father while he worked. It was all we could do to find a live patient to treat. And bed after bed after bed we found dead people. And father started giggling. Castle continued. It was all we could do. It was all we could do to find a live patient to treat. In bed after bed, we found dead people, and father was started giggling, Castle continued. He couldn't stop. He walked out into the night with his flashlight. He was still giggling. He was making the flashlight beam dance over all the dead people stacked outside. He put his hand on my head. And do you know what that marvelous man said to me? Asked Castle. Nope. My father said to me, someday this will all be yours. Damn. 74, Cat's Cradle. This one's called The Cat's Cradle. It's actually named after the book. I went to Frank's house in San Lorenzo's one taxicab. We passed through scenes of hideous want. We climbed the slope of Mount McCabe. The air grew cooler. There was mist. Frank's house had once been the home of Nestor Amons, father of Mona, architect of the House of Hope and Mercy in the jungle. Amons had designed it. It straddled a waterfall, had a terrace cantilevered out into the mist rising from the fall. It was a cunning lattice, very light steel posts and beams. The interstices of lattice were variously open, chinked with native stone, glazed or curtained by sheets of canvas. The effect of the house was not so much to enclose as to announce that a man had been whimsically busy there. A servant greeted me politely and told me that Frank wasn't home yet. Frank was expected at any moment. Frank had left orders to the effect that I was to be made happy and comfortable and that I was to stay for supper in the night. The servant, who introduced himself as Stanley, was the first plump San Lorenzo I had seen. Stanley led me to my room, led me around the heart of the house, down a staircase of living stone, a staircase sheltered or exposed by steel frame rectangles at random. My bed was a foam rubber slab on a stone shelf. A shelf of living stone. The walls of my chamber were canvas. Stanley demonstrated how I might roll them up or down as I pleased. I asked Stanley if anybody else was home, and he told me that only Newt was. Newt, he said, was out on the cantilevered terrace, painting a picture. Angela, he said, had gone sightseeing to the House of Hope and Mercy in the jungle. I went out onto the giddy terrace that straddled the waterfall and found little Newt asleep in a yellow butterfly chair. The painting on which Newt had been working was set on an easel next to the aluminum railing. The painting was framed in a misty view of sky, sea, and valley. Newt painting was small and black and warty. It consisted of scratches made in a black, gummy impasto. The scratches formed a sort of spider's web. I wondered if they might not be the sticky nets of human futility hung up on a moonless night to dry. I did not wake up the midget who had made this dreadful thing. I smoked, listening to imagined voices in the water sounds. What awakened little Newt was an explosion far below. It caromed up the valley and went to God. It was a cannon on the waterfront and boulevard. Frank's major domo told me it was fired every day at 5. Little Newt stirred. While still half snoozing, he put his black, painty hands to his mouth and chin, leaving black smears there. He rubbed his eyes and made black smears around them too. Hello, he said to me sleepily. Hello, I said. I like your painting. You see what it is? I suppose it means something different to everyone who sees it. It's a cat's cradle. Aha, I said. Very good. The scratches are string, right? One of the oldest games there is, cat's cradle. Even the Eskimos know it. You don't say. For maybe 100 years or more, grown-ups have been waving tangles of string in their children's faces. Newt remained curled in the chair. He held out his painty hands as though a cat's cradle was strung between them. No wonder kids grow up crazy. A cat's cradle was nothing but a bunch of X's between somebody's hands, and little kids look and look and look at all those X's, and no damn cat, no damn cradle. 75. Give my regards to Albert Schweitzer. And then Angela Honecker Connors, Newt's beanpole sister, came in with Julian Castle, father of Philip and the founder of the House of Hope and Mercy. in the jungle. Castle wore a baggy white linen suit and a string tie. He had a scraggly mustache. He was bald, he was scrawny, he was a saint, I think. He introduced himself to Newt and to me on the cantilevered terrace. He forestalled all references to his possible saintliness by talking out of the corner of his mouth like a movie gangster. I understand you are a follower of Albert Schweitzer, I said to him. At a distance, he gave a criminal sneer. I never met the gentleman. He must surely know of your work, just as you know of his. Maybe and maybe not. You ever see him? No. You ever expect to see him? Someday maybe I will. Well, said Julian Castle, in case you run across Dr. Schweitzer in your travels, you might tell him that he is not my hero. He lit a big cigar. When the cigar was going good and hot, he pointed its red end at me. You can tell him he isn't my hero, he said, but you can also tell him that thanks to him, Jesus Christ is his hero. I think he'll be glad to hear it. I don't give a damn if he is or not. This is something between Jesus and me. 76. Julian Castle agrees with Newt that everything is meaningless. Julian Castle and Angela went to Newt's painting. Castle made a pinhole of a curled index finger, squinted at the painting through it. What do you think of it? I asked him. It's black. What is it, hell? It means whatever it means, said Newt. Then it's hell, snarled Castle. I was told a moment ago that it was a cat's cradle, I said. Inside information always helps, said Castle. I don't think it's very nice, Angela complained. I think it's ugly, but I don't know anything about modern art. Sometimes I wish Newt would take some lessons so he can know for sure if he was doing something or not. Self-taught are you? Julian Castle asked Newt. Isn't everybody? Newt inquired. Very good answer. Castle was respectful. I undertook to explain the deeper significance of the cat's cradle since Newt seemed disinclined to go through that song and dance again. Castle nodded sagely. So this is a picture of the meaningless of it all. I couldn't agree more. Do you really agree? I asked. A minute ago you said something about Jesus. Who? Said Castle. Jesus Christ. Oh, said Castle. Him? He shrugged. People have to talk about something just to keep their voice boxes in working order. So they have good voice boxes in case there's ever anything really meaningful to say. I see. I knew I wasn't going to have an easy time writing a popular article about him. I was going to have to concentrate on his saintly deeds and ignore entirely the satanic things he thought and said. You may quote me, he said. Man is vile. A man makes nothing worth making, knows nothing worth knowing. He leaned down and he shook little Newt's painted hand. Right? Newt nodded, seeming to suspect momentarily that the case had been a little overstated. Right. And then the saint marched to Newt's painting and took it from his easel. He beamed it at us all. Garbage, like everything else. And he threw the painting off the cantilevered. I gather, I said, that there are still several botanists on the island despite the laws, despite the Hayuka. He laughed. You haven't caught on yet to what? Everybody on San Lorenzo is a devout botanist. The Hayuka notwithstanding. Yeah, no, see, yeah. Sorry guys, I skipped over. Alright, so he says garbage like anything else, and he threw the painting off the cantilevered terrace. It sailed out onto an updraft, stalled, boomeranged back, sliced into the waterfall. There was nothing little Newt could say. Angela spoke first. You got paint all over your face, honey. Go wash it off. 77. Aspirin and Bokumaro. Tell me, doctor, I said to Julian Castle. How is Papa Manzano? How would I know? I thought you'd probably been treating him. We don't speak, Castle smiled. He doesn't speak to me, that is. The last thing he said to me, which was about 3 years ago, was that the only thing that kept me off the hook was my American citizenship. What have you done to offend him? You come down here and with your own money found a free hospital for his people. Papa doesn't like the way we treat the whole patient, said Castle, particularly the whole patient when he's dying. At the House of Hope and Mercy in the jungle, we administer the last rites of the Bacchanist Church to those who want them. What are the rites like? Very simple. They start with the responsive reading. You want to respond? I'm not that close to death just now, if you don't mind. He gave me a grisly wink. You're wise to be cautious. People taking the last rites have a way of dying on cue. I think we could keep you from going all the way, though, if we didn't touch feet. Feet. He told me about the Bacchanist attitude relative to feet. Related to feet. He told me about the Bacchanist attitude related to feet. I explained something I saw in the hotel. I told him about the 2 painters on the windowsill. It works, you know, he said. People who do that really do feel better about each other in the world. Bokumaro, sir. That's what the foot business is called, said Castle. It works. I'm grateful for things that work. Not many things do work, you know. I suppose not. I couldn't possibly run the hospital of mine if it weren't for aspirin and Bakumaro. I gather, I said, that there are still several Botanists on the island despite the laws, despite the hook. He laughed. You haven't caught on yet. To what? Everybody on San Lorenzo was a devout Botanist. The Hayuka, the hook, notwithstanding. 78, ring of steel. When Bokanan and McCabe took over this miserable country years ago, said Julian Castle, they threw out the priests, and then Bokanan cynically and playfully invented a new religion. I know, I said. Well, when it became evident that no governmental or economic reform was going to make the people much less miserable, the religion became the one real instrument of hope. Truth was the enemy of the people because the truth was so terrible, so Bokanan made it his business to provide the people with better and better lives. How did he come to be an outlaw? It was his own idea, he asked McCabe, to outlaw him and his religion too, in order to give the religious life of people more zest and more tang. He wrote a little poem about it, incidentally. Castle quoted this poem, which does not appear in the book of Bokanan. So I said goodbye to government, and I gave my reason, that a really good religion is a form of treason. Bokanan suggested the hook, too, as a proper punishment for Botanists, he said. It was something he'd seen in the Chamber of Horrors at Madame Tussauds. He winked ghoulishly. That was for zest, too. And many people died on the hook. Not at first. At first it was all make-believe. Rumors were cunningly circulated about executions, but no one really knew anyone who had died that way. McCabe had a good old time making bloodthirsty threats against the Botanists, which was everybody. And Bokanan went into cozy hiding in the jungle, Castle continued, where he wrote and preached all day long and ate good things his disciples brought him. McCabe would organize the unemployed, which was practically everybody, into great Bokanan hunts. But every 6 months, McCabe would announce triumphantly that Bokanan was surrounded by a ring of steel, which was remorselessly closing in. And the leaders of the remorseless ring would have to report to McCabe, full of jargon and apoplexy, A-P-O-P-L-E-X-Y, that Bokanan had done the impossible. He had escaped, had evaporated, had lived to preach another day. Miracle. Number 79, why McCabe's soul grew coarse. McCabe and Bokanan did not succeed in raising what is generally thought of as the standard of living, said Castle. The truth was that life was as short and brutish and mean as ever, but people didn't have to pay as much attention to the awful truth. As the living legend of the cruel tyrant in the city, and the gentle holy man in the jungle grew, so too did the happiness of the people grow. They were all employed full-time as actors in a play they understood that any human being anywhere could understand and applaud. So life became a work of art, I marveled. Yes, there was only one trouble with it. Oh, the drama was very tough on the souls of the two main characters, McCabe and Bokanan. As young men, they had been pretty much alike, had both been half angel, half pirate. But the drama demanded that the pirate half of Bokanan and the angel half of McCabe wither away. And McCabe and Bokanan paid a terrible price in the agony for the happiness of the people. McCabe knowing the agony of the tyrant, and Bokanan knowing the agony of the saint, they both became, for all practical purposes, insane. Castle crooked the index finger of his left hand, and then people really did start dying on the Hayuka. But Bokanan was never caught, I asked. McCabe never went that crazy, never made a really serious effort to catch Bokanan. It would have been easy to do. Why didn't he catch him? McCabe was always sane enough to realize that without the holy man of war against, he himself would become meaningless. Papa Mazzano understands that too. The people still die on the hook? It's inevitably fatal. I mean, I said, does Papa really have people executed that way? He executes one every 2 years just to keep the pot boiling, so to speak. He sighed, looking up at the evening sky. Busy, busy, busy. Sir? It's what we Botanists say, he said, when we feel that a lot of mysterious things are going on. Busy, busy, busy. You? I was amazed. A Botanist too? He gazed at me levelly. You too. You'll find out. 80. The Waterfall Strainers. Angela and Newt were on the cantilevered terrace with Julian Castle and me. We had cocktails. There was still no word from Frank. Both Angela and Newt, it appeared, were fairly heavy drinkers. Castle told me that his days as a playboy had cost him a kidney and that he was unhappily compelled, perforce, to stick to ginger ale. Angela, when she got a few drinks into her, complained of how the world had swindled her father. He gave so much and they gave him so little. I pressed her for examples of the world's stinginess and got some exact numbers. General Forge and Foundry gave him a $45 million bonus for every patient his work led to. She said, no, I gave him $45 bonus for not 40 million. She said that's the same patent bonus they paid anybody in the company. She shook her head mournfully. $45, and just think what some of those patents were for. I said, I assume he got a salary too. The most he ever made was $28,000 a year. I'd say that was pretty good. She got very huffy. You know what movie stars make? A lot sometimes. You know Dr. Bree made $10,000 more a year than my father did? That was certainly an injustice. I'm sick of injustice. She was so shrilly exercised that I changed the subject. I asked Julian Castle what he thought had become of the painting he had thrown down the waterfall. There's a little village at the bottom, he told me. 5 or 10 shacks, I'd say. It's Papa Mazzano's birthplace. Incidentally, the waterfall ends in a big stone bowl there. The villagers have a net made out of chicken wire stretched across a notch in the bowl. Water spills out through the notch into a stream. Anute's painting is in the net now. You think? I asked. This is a poor country, in case you haven't noticed, said Castle. Nothing stays in the net very long, I imagine. New painting is being dried in the sun by now, along with the butt of my cigar. 4 square feet of gummy canvas, the 4 milled and mitred sticks of the stretcher, some tacks too, and a cigar. All in all, a pretty nice catch for some poor man. I could just scream sometimes, said Angela, when I think about how much some people get paid and how little they paid father, and how much he gave. She was on the edge of a crying jag. Don't cry, Newt begged her gently. Sometimes I can't help it, she said. Go get your clarinet, urged Newt. That always helps. I thought at first that this was a fairly comical suggestion, but then from Angela's reaction, I learned that the suggestion was serious and practical. When I get this way, she said to Castle and me, sometimes it's the only thing that helps. But she was too shy to get her clarinet right away. We had to keep begging her to play, and she had to have 2 more drinks. She's really just wonderful, little Newt promised. I'd love to hear you play, said Castle. All right, said Angela finally, as she rose steadily. All right, I will. When she was out of earshot, Newt apologized for her. She's had a tough time. She needs a rest. She's been sick, I asked. Her husband is mean as hell to her, said Newt. He showed us that he hated Angela's handsome young husband, the extremely successful Harrison C. Connors, president of Fabritech. He hardly ever comes home, and when he does, he's drunk and generally covered with lipstick. From the way she talked, I said I thought it was a very happy marriage. Little Newt held his hands 6 inches apart, and he spread his fingers. See the cat? See the cradle? Little Newt held his hands 6 inches apart, and he spread his fingers. See the cat? See the cradle? Cat's cradle. 81. A white bride for the son of a Pullman porter. I did not know what was going to come from Angela's clarinet. No one could have imagined what was going to come from there. I expected something pathological, but I did not expect the death, the violence, and the almost intolerable beauty of disease. Angela moistened and warmed the mouthpiece, but did not blow a single preliminary note. Her eyes glazed over, and her long, bony fingers twittered idly over the noiseless keys. I waited anxiously, and I remembered what Marvin Breed had told me, that Angela's one escape from her bleak life with her father was to her room, where she would lock the door and play along with phonograph records. Newt now put a long playing record on the large phonograph in the room off the terrace. He came back with the record slipcase, which he handed to me. The record was called Cat House Piano. It was of unaccompanied piano by Meade Lux Lewis. The record was called Cat House Piano. It was of unaccompanied piano by Meade Lux Lewis. Unaccompanied piano, maybe just only piano. Since Angela, in order to deepen her trance, let Lewis play his first number without joining him, I read some of what the jacket said about Lewis. Born in Louisville, Kentucky in 1905, I read, Mr. Lewis didn't turn to music until he had passed his 16th birthday, and then the instrument provided by his father was a violin. A year later, young Lewis chanced to hear Jimmy Yancey play the piano. This, as Lewis recalls, was the real thing. Soon, I read, Lewis was teaching himself to play the boogie-woogie piano, absorbing all that was possible from the older Yancey, who remained until his death a close friend and idol to Mr. Lewis, since his father was a Pullman porter. I read, the Lewis family lived near the railroad. The rhythm of the train soon became a natural pattern to young Lewis, and he had composed the boogie-woogie solo, now a classic of its kind, which became known as honky-tonk train blues. I looked up from my reading. The first number on the record was done. The phonograph needle was now scratching a slow way across the void to the second. The second number, I learned from the jacket, was Dragon Blues. Meade Lux Lewis played 4 bars alone, and then Angela Honecker joined in. Her eyes were closed, I was flabbergasted. She was great. She improved around the music of the Pullman Porter's son. Went from liquid lyricism to rasping lechery to the shrill skittishness of a frightened child to a heroin nightmare. Her glissandi spoke of heaven and hell and all that lay between. Such music from such a woman can only be a case of schizophrenia or demonic possession. My hair stood on end as though Angela were rolling on the floor, foaming at the mouth and babbling fluent Babylonian. When the music was done, I shrieked at Julian Castle, who was transfixed too. My God, life, who can understand even one little minute of it? Don't try, he said, just pretend you understand. That's very good advice, I went limp. Castle quoted another poem. Tiger got to hunt, bird got to fly, man got to sit and wonder, why? Tiger got to sleep, bird got to land, man got to tell himself he understand. What's that from, I asked. What could it possibly be from but the books of Buchanan? I'd love to see a copy sometime. Copies are hard to come by, said Castle. They aren't printed. They're made by hand, and of course there is no such thing as a completed copy, since Buchanan is adding things every day. Little Newt snorted. Religion? Beg your pardon, Castle said. See the cat, asked Newt. See the cradle. 82. Zaman Kibo. Zama-Kibo. Number 82. Major General Franklin Honecker didn't appear for supper. He telephoned and insisted on talking to me and no one else. He told me that he was keeping a vigil by Papa's bed, that Papa was dying in great pain. Frank sounded scared and lonely. Look, I said, why don't I go back to my hotel and you and I can get together later when this crisis is over? No, you stay right there. I want you to be where I can get a hold of you right away. He was panicky about my slipping out of his grasp. Since I couldn't account for his interest in me, I began to feel panicked too. Can you give me some idea what you want to see me about, I asked. Not over the telephone. Something about your father, something about you, something I've done, something you're going to do. I heard a chicken clucking in the background of Frank's end of the line. I heard a door open, and xylophone music came from some chamber. This music was again When Day Is Done. And then the door was closed, and I couldn't hear the music anymore. I appreciate it if you give me some small hint of what you expect me to do so I can sort of get set, I said. Zama Kibo, what? It's a Bacchanist word. I just don't know any Bacchanist words. Julian Castle's there? Yes, ask him, said Frank. I've got to go now, he hung up. So I asked Julian Castle what Zama Kibo meant. You want a simple answer or a whole answer? Let's start with the simple one. Fate, inevitable, destiny. 83. Dr. Schlitzer von Koenigswald approaches the break-even point. Cancer, said Julian Castle at dinner when I told him that Papa was dying in pain. Cancer of what? Cancer of about everything. You say he collapsed on the reviewing stand today. He sure did, said Angela. That was the effect of drugs, Castle declared. He's at the point now where drugs and pain just about balance out. More drugs would kill him. I'd kill myself, I think, murmured New. He was sitting on a sort of folding chair he took with him when he was visiting. It was made of aluminum tubing and canvas. It beats sitting on a dictionary, an atlas, and a telephone book, he said when he erected it. That's what Corporal McCabe did, of course, said Castle. He named his major domo as his successor, then he shot himself. Cancer too? I asked. I can't be sure, I don't think so, though. Unrelieved villainy just wore him out, is my guess. That was all before my time. This certainly is a cheerful conversation, said Angela. I think everybody would agree that these are cheerful times, said Castle. Well, I said to him, I think you would have more reasons for being cheerful than most, doing what you are doing with your life. I once had a yacht too, you know. I don't follow you. Having a yacht is a reason for being more cheerful than most, too. If you aren't Papa as a doctor, I said, who is? One of my staff, a Dr. Schlitzer von Koenigswald. A German? Vaguely. He was in the SS for 14 years. He was a camp physician at Auschwitz for 6 of those years. Doing penance at the House of Hope and Mercy, is he? Yes, said Castle, and making great strides, too, saving lives right and left. Good for him. Yes, if he keeps going at his present rate, working night and day, the number of people he saved will equal to the number of people he let die in the year 3010. So there's another member of my Karas, Dr. Schlitzer von Koenigswald. 84, blackout. 3 hours after supper, Frank still hadn't come home. Julian Castle excused himself and went back to the House of Hope and Mercy in the jungle. Angela and Newt and I sat on the cantilever terrace. The lights of Bolivar were lovely below us. There was a great illumined illuminated cross on top of the administration building of Manzano Airport. It was motor-driven, turning slowly, boxing the compass with electric piety. There were other bright places on the island, too, to the north of us. Mountains prevented our seeing them directly, but we could see in the sky their balloons of light. I asked Stanley Frank Honecker's major domo to identify for me the sources of auroras. He pointed them out counterclockwise. House and Hope of Mercy in the Jungle, Papa's Palace, and Fort Jesus. Fort Jesus, the training camp for our soldiers. It's named after Jesus Christ? Sure, why not? There was a new balloon of light growing quickly to the north. Before I could ask what it was, it revealed itself as headlights topping a ridge. The headlights were coming toward us. They belonged to a convoy. The convoy was composed of 5 American-made army trucks. Machine gunners manned ring mounts on tops of the cabs. The convoy stopped in Frank's driveway. Soldiers dismounted at once. They set to work on the grounds, digging foxholes and machine gun pits. I went out with Frank's major domo to ask the officer in charge what was going on. We have been ordered to protect the next president, San Lorenzo, said the officer in island dialect. He isn't here now, I informed. I don't know anything about it, he said. My orders are to dig in here, that's all I know. I told Angela and Newt about it. Do you think there's any real danger, Angela asked me. I'm a stranger here myself, I said. At that moment, there was a power failure. Every electric light in San Lorenzo went out. Frank's servants, a pack of FOMA. Frank's servants brought us gasoline lanterns, told us that power failures were common in San Lorenzo, that there was no cause for alarm. I found that disquiet was hard for me to set aside, however, since Frank had spoken of my Zamakibo. He had made me feel as though my own free will were as irrelevant as the free will of a piggy wiggy arriving at Chicago stockyards. I remembered again the Stone Angel and Ilium. I listened to the soldiers outside, to their clinking, chunking, murmuring labors. I was unable to concentrate on the conversation that Angela and Newt, though they got onto a fairly interesting subject. They told me that their father had had an identical twin. I had never met him. His name was Rudolph. The last they had heard of him, he was a music box manufacturer in Zurich, Switzerland. Father's hardly ever mentioned him, said Angela. Father hardly ever mentioned anybody, Newt declared. There was a sister of the old man, too, they told me. Her name was Celia. She raised giant schnauzers on Shelter Island, New York. She always sends a Christmas card, said Angela, with a picture of a giant schnauzer on it, said little Newt. It sure is funny how different people in different families turn out, Angela observed. That's very true and well said, I agreed. I excused myself from the glittering company and asked Stanley, the major domo, if there happened to be a copy of the books of Bokanen about the house. Stanley pretended not to know what I was talking about. Then he grumbled that the books of Bokanen were filth, and then he insisted that anyone who read them should die on the hook. Then he brought me a copy from Frank's bedside table. It was a heavy thing about the size of an unabridged dictionary. It was written by hand. I trundled it off to my bedroom, to my slab of rubber on living rock. There was no index, so my search for the implications of Zama Kibu was in fact fruitless that night. I learned some things, but they were scarcely helpful. I learned of the Botanist Cosmogony, for instance, wherein Boraisi, the sun, held Pabu, the moon, in his arms, and hoped that Pabu would bear him a fiery child. But poor Babu gave birth to children that were cold, that did not burn, and Boraisi threw them away in disgust. These were the planets who circled the terrible father at a safe distance. Then poor Babu herself was cast away, and she went to live with their favorite child, which was Earth. Earth was Pabu's favorite because it had people on it, and the people looked about her and loved her and sympathized. And what opinion did Bokanon hold of his own cosmogony? Foma, lies, he wrote, a pack of Foma. 86, 2 little jugs. It's hard to believe that I slept at all, but I must have, for otherwise how could I have found myself awakened by a series of bangs and a flood of light? I rolled out of bed at the first bang and ran to the heart of the house in the brainless ecstasy of a volunteer fireman. I found myself rushing headlong at Newt and Angela, who were fleeing from the beds of their own. We all stopped short, sheepishly analyzing the nightmarish sounds around us, sorting them out as coming from a radio, from an electric dishwasher, from a pump, all restored to noisy life by the return of electrical power. The three of us awakened enough to realize that there was a humor in our situation, that we had reacted in amusingly human ways to a situation that seemed mortal but wasn't. And to demonstrate my mastery over my illusory fate, I turned the radio off. Over my illusory fate, I turned the radio off. We all chuckled, and we all vied in saving face to be the greatest student of human nature, the person with the quickest sense of humor. I knew it was the quickest. He pointed out to me that I had my passport and my billfold and my wristwatch in my hands. I had no idea what I'd grabbed in the face of death, didn't know I'd grab anything. I countered hilariously by asking Angela and knew why it was that they both carried little thermos jugs, identical red and gray jugs capable of holding about 3 cups of coffee. It was news to them both that they were carrying such jugs. They were shocked to find them in their hands. They were spared making an explanation about more banging outside. I was bound to find out what was banging was right away, and with brazenness as unjustified as my earlier panic, I investigated, found Frank Vonnegut outside tinkering with a motor generator set mounted on a truck. The generator was a new source of electricity. The gasoline motor that drove it was backfiring and smoking. Frank was trying to fix it. He had the heavenly Mona with him. She was watching him, as always, gravely. "Boy, have I got news for you. He yelled at me, and he led the way back into the house. Angela and Newt were still in the living room, but somehow, somewhere, they had managed to get rid of their peculiar thermos jugs. The contents of those jugs, of course, were parts of the legacies from Dr. Felix Honnecker, were parts of the Wampetier, my Karas, or chips of Ice 9. Frank took me aside. "How awake are you?" "As awake as I ever was. I hope you're really wide awake, because we got to have a talk right now." "Start talking. Let's get some privacy." Frank told Mona to make herself comfortable. "We'll call you if we need you." I looked at Mona meltingly, and I thought that I had never needed anyone as much as I needed her. 87. The cut of my jib. About this, Franklin Honnecker, the pinch-faced child, spoke with the timbre and conviction of a kazoo. I heard it said in the army that such and such a man spoke like a man with paper rectum. Such a man was General Honnecker. Poor Frank had almost no experience in talking to anyone, having spent a furtive childhood as secret agent X9. Now, hoping to be hearty and persuasive, he said tiny things to me, things like, "I like the cut of your jib. I want to talk cold turkey to you, man to man." And he took me down to what he called his den in order that we might call a spade and let the chips fall where they may. So we went down steps, cut into a cliff, and into a natural cave that was beneath and behind the waterfall. There were a couple of drawing tables down there, 3 pale, bare-bones Scandinavian chairs, a bookcase containing books on architecture, books in German, French, Finnish, Italian, English. All was lit by electric lights that pulsed with the panting of the motor generator set. And the most striking thing about the cave was that there were pictures painted on the walls, painted with kindergarten boldness, painted with the flat clay, earth, and charcoal colors of the very early man. I did not have to ask Frank how the old cave paintings were. I was able to date them back by their subject. The paintings were not of mammoths or saber-toothed tigers or ichthyophallic cave bears. The paintings treated endlessly the aspects of Mona Amon's Mazzano as a little girl. This is where Mona's father worked, I asked. That's right, he was a Finn who designed the House of Hope and Mercy in the Jungle. I know. That isn't what I brought you down here to talk about. This is something about your father. This is about you. Frank put his hand on my shoulder and he looked me in the eye. The effect was dismaying. Frank meant to inspire camaraderie, but his head looked to me like a bizarre little owl, blinded by light and perched on a tall white post. Maybe you'd better come to the point. There's no sense in beating around the bush, he says. I'm a pretty good judge of character, and if I do say so myself, and I like the cut of your jib. Thank you. I think you and I could really hit it off. I have no doubt about it. We both got things that mesh. I was grateful when he took his hand from my shoulder. He meshed his fingers of his hands like geared teeth. One hand represented him, I suppose, and the other represented me. We need each other, he wiggled his fingers to show me how gears worked. I was silent for some time, though outwardly afraid. Outwardly friendly. I was silent for some time, though outwardly friendly. Do you get my meaning? Asked Frank at last. You and I were going to do something together? That's right, Frank clapped his hands. You're a worldly person, used to meeting the public, and I'm a technical person, used to working behind the scenes, making things go. How can you possibly know what kind of a person I am? We just met. Your clothes, the way you talk. He put his hand on my shoulder again. I like the cut of your jib. So you said. Frank was frantic for me to complete his thought, to do it enthusiastically, but I was still at sea. You might have understand that you were offering me some kind of job here in San Lorenzo. He clapped his hands. He was delighted. That's right. What would you say to $100,000 a year? Good God, I cried. What would I have to do for that? Practically nothing. and you drink out of gold goblets every night and eat off of gold plates and have a palace all your own. What's the job? President of the Republic of San Lorenzo. 88. Why Frank couldn't be president? Me, president, I guess? Who else is there? Nuts. Don't say no until you've really thought about it. Frank watched me anxiously. No, you haven't really thought about it. Enough to know it's crazy. Frank made his fingers into gears again. We'd work together. I'd be backing you up all the time. Good, so if I got plugged from the front, you'd get it too? Plugged, shot, assassinated. Frank was mystified. Why would anybody shoot you so he could get to be president? Frank shook his head. Nobody in San Lorenzo wants to be president, he promised me. It's against the religion. It's against your religion too? I thought you were going to be the next president. He said it, and found it hard to go on. He looked haunted. You what? I asked. He faced a sheet of water that curtained the cave. Maturity, the way I understand it, he told me, is knowing what your limitations are. He wasn't far from Bokanon in defining maturity. Maturity, Bokanon tells us, is a bitter disappointment for which no remedy exists, unless laughter can be said to remedy anything. I know I've got limitations, Frank continued. They're the same limitations my father had. Oh, I got a lot of very good ideas, just the way my father did, Frank told me, in the Waterfall. But he was no good at facing the public, and neither am I. 89, Duffel. You'll take the job, Frank inquired anxiously. No, I told him. Do you know anybody who might want the job? Frank was giving a classic illustration of what Bokanon calls a dufle. Duffel or dufle, in the Balkanist sense, is the destiny of thousands upon thousands of persons who placed in the hands of a stupa. A stupa is a fog-bound child. I laughed. Something's funny. Pay no attention to when I laugh, I begged him. I'm a notorious pervert in that respect. Are you laughing at me? I shook my head. No. Word of honor. Word of honor. People used to make fun of me all the time. You must have imagined that. They used to yell things at me. I didn't imagine that. People are unkind sometimes without meaning to be. I suggested I wouldn't have given him a word of honor on that. You know what they used to yell at me? No. They used to yell at me, hey, X9, where you going? That doesn't seem too bad. That's what they used to call me, said Frank in a sulky reminiscence. Secret Agent X9. I didn't tell him I knew that already. Where are you going, X9? Frank echoed again. I imagined what the taunters had been like. Imagined where fate had eventually goosed and chivaled them to. The wits who had yelled at Frank were surely nicely settled in the death-like jobs at General Ford and Foundry, at Alien Power and Light at the telephone company. And here by God was Secret Agent X9, a major general, offering to make me king in a cave that was curtained by a tropical waterfall. They really would have been surprised if I'd stopped and told them where I was going. You mean you had some premonition you'd end up here? It was a balkanist question. I was going to Jack's hobby shop, he said, with no sense of anticlimax. Oh, they all knew I was going there, but they didn't know what really went on there. They would have been really surprised, especially the girls, if they'd found out what really went on. The girls didn't think I knew anything about girls. What really went on? I was screwing Jack's wife every day. That's how come I fell asleep all the time in high school. That's how come I never achieved my full potential. He roused himself from this sordid recollection. Come on, be president of San Lorenzo. You'd be real good at it with your personality, please. 90, only one catch. And the time of night, in the cave, in the waterfall, and the stone angel in Ilium. And 250,000 cigarettes, and 3,000 quarts of booze, and 2 wives and no wife. And no love waiting for me anywhere. And the listless life of an ink-stained hack. And Pabu, the moon, and Borasisi, the sun, and their children, all things conspired to form one cosmic vindicate, one mighty shove into Balkanism, into the belief that God was running my life and that he had work for me to do. And inwardly I sarooned, which is to say that I acquiesced to the seeming demands of my vindicate. Inwardly I agreed to become the next president of San Lorenzo. Outwardly I was still guarded, suspicious. There must be a catch, I hedged. There isn't. There'll be an election. There never has been. We'll just announce the new president is. And nobody will object. Nobody objects to anything. They aren't interested. They don't care. There has to be a catch. There's kind of one, Frank admitted. I knew it. I began to shrink from my vindicate. What is it? What's the catch? Well, it isn't really a catch because you don't have to do it if you don't want to. It would be a good idea, though. Let's hear this great idea. Well, if you're going to be president, I think you really ought to marry Mona, but you don't have to if you don't want to. You're the boss. She would have me? If she'd have me, she'd have you. All you have to do is ask her. Why would she say yes? It's predicted in the books of Bacchanal that she'll marry the next president of San Lorenzo, said Frank. 91, Mona. I'm gonna stop right here, y'all. So I just stopped at chapter 90. It's where I stopped. Peace.